Nadia and Sasha Volkov were born 7 minutes apart in a hospital in Kiev, Ukraine, on a December night so cold that the snow on the windowsills of the maternity ward had frozen into ridges of ice that caught the light from the corridor and held it there, blue and still. Nadia came first, Sasha came second. Sasha, their mother, a mathematics professor named Irina, who had survived things that required more than mathematics to understand, looked at them both and said in Ukrainian, to the nurse who was cleaning her hands, "They will not be easy women, but they will be necessary ones." She was correct on both counts. They were identical in the way that required people to look twice and then look again and still sometimes get it wrong. Same pale skin that went pink in the cold and gold in the summer. Same dark blonde hair that was almost brown in winter and almost blonde in bright sun. Same wide Slavic cheekbones. Same light gray eyes that were so pale they occasionally appeared silver, and that in certain photographs looked like the eyes had been left out entirely. Two pale windows into something else. Same hands, narrow and precise, their mother's hands. The hands of a woman who drew diagrams and proved theorems, and expected the world to be logical, which it frequently wasn't. They were 33 years old. They had been separated more times than either of them could name, and had always found their way back to each other, because twins who share a face and a language and a childhood share something that geography and circumstance cannot dissolve. Sasha Volkov was an investigative journalist. She worked for a Berlin-based news organization called Frontline Press, which operated in the tradition of organizations willing to publish things that comfortable people preferred not to know. She covered Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and the particular overlap between those regions and the murky world of private military contractors, resource extraction, and the kind of corporate violence that wore a business suit and signed contracts that governments then denied signing. She was good, and not famous good, carefully good, the kind of good that meant her sources trusted her, and her editors trusted her, and the people she wrote about monitored her with the specific, watchful attention that powerful people give to journalists who are not going to go away. She had broken 3 major stories in 5 years, each of them involving the intersection of private military contractors and natural resource concessions in post-conflict zones, each of them resulting in public denials and private fury from the organizations she named. The organization she was currently investigating was called Vanguard Solutions. Vanguard Solutions was headquartered in Zurich. It had offices in Dubai, Singapore, and Washington. It provided, according to its website, integrated security and risk management services to corporate and governmental clients operating in high-risk environments. It had approximately 400 employees, of whom roughly 200 were former special operations personnel from 6 different countries. It had contracts with mining companies, oil exploration firms, and at least 2 governments whose names were not on the website. What Vanguard Solutions also did, according to the documentary evidence that Sasha had been assembling for 8 months, was provide armed force in support of illegal land seizure operations in 3 African countries. Specifically, it had provided security for the forcible displacement of mining communities in the DRC, northern Mozambique, and the borderland between Zambia and Zimbabwe. These operations had resulted in destruction of property, displacement of civilians, and in several documented instances, civilian deaths. Sasha had the documents. She had witness testimony. She had, most critically, a financial trail linking Vanguard Solutions to 3 publicly traded European mining corporations through a chain of shell companies that terminated at a law firm in Luxembourg that existed for no other discernible purpose. She also had, apparently, a leak. She was in Nairobi when they came for her. She was there to meet a source who had promised additional documentation confirming the financial connection. The meeting was at a hotel in the Westlands district. She was in the lobby at 9 p.m., waiting. 3 men, not Kenyan, European from their build and their movement. They wore the casual clothes of business travelers. They moved with the specific controlled efficiency of people who had done this before and who expected it to be quick and uncomplicated. Sasha was not quick and uncomplicated. She was a journalist who covered militias and mercenaries and had spent 8 years in environments where threat assessment was a survival skill. She saw them at the same moment they fixed on her. She had time to stand, time to move 2 steps, time to shout once. Then she didn't have time for anything. They took her out of the lobby through a side entrance. They had a vehicle outside. They were fast and they were professional, and the whole thing took 40 seconds, and the 2 hotel staff who witnessed it were uncertain enough about what they had seen that they didn't call anyone for 11 minutes. Sasha's source, who arrived at the hotel at 9:07 p.m., saw the disturbance and understood what had happened, and called the number that Sasha had given him for emergencies. The number went to a woman in Berlin who called the police and called Frontline Press, and called one other number. That other number rang twice in an apartment in Vienna, Austria, at 9:23 p.m. Nadia answered on the second ring. The person on the other end of the line was Frontline Press's security coordinator, a former British soldier named Tom Hartley, who was responsible for the physical safety of the organization's correspondence. He told her what he knew. Sasha taken from the Westlands Hotel. 3 men. Unknown destination. 11-minute delay before notification. Nadia listened. She held the phone against her ear and she stood in the center of her apartment, which was clean and spare and contained very little beyond a desk, a shelf of books and a coffee maker. And she listened to every word, and she did not speak until he was done. "What police resources are engaged?" she asked. Kenyan National Police were notified at 9:15. Interpol notification is in process. What hotel security footage exists? The hotel manager says there are cameras in the lobby and the exterior entrance. Kenyan police have requested the footage. The 3 men. Any description beyond European origin? Hartley gave her what he had. She took it. She processed it. She thought about Sasha in a vehicle in Nairobi at 9 p.m., being driven somewhere by 3 men who were not Kenyan police and were not tourists and were not anything other than what they were, which was professionals who had been sent to remove a journalist who had found something someone wanted to remain unfound. "Thank you, Tom," she said. "Keep me informed." She hung up. She stood in her apartment for 45 seconds. She looked at her coffee maker. She looked at the books on the shelf. She looked at a photograph on the wall, the only photograph in the apartment, of herself and Sasha taken in Prague 2 years ago. Same face, same gray eyes. Sasha's arm around Nadia's shoulder, both of them laughing at something that had already been forgotten. Then she went to her bedroom and opened the floor safe under the bed. Nadia Volkov was not a Viennese professional who worked in risk consulting, which was what her apartment and her business cards and her residence permit said. She had been that for 3 years. Before that, she had been something considerably different, and the items in the floor safe, maintained with the same methodical care that she maintained everything in her life, belonged to the person she had been before. A Glock 19 with 2 loaded magazines, a combat knife, a set of lockpicks, 2 passports under names that were not Nadia Volkov, 40,000 euros in mixed currency, a satellite phone, and a small device that looked like a wireless charger, but was an encrypted communications unit, capable of transmitting and receiving data through a channel that existed outside any commercial infrastructure. Nadia had been born in Kiev and educated in mathematics like her mother at the University of Kiev. She had been recruited at 22 by the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Directorate, the HUR, and had served for 3 years before being identified through a joint vetting process and brought into a collaborative operational program between Ukrainian, American, and British intelligence that conducted operations against Russian-linked criminal and paramilitary networks operating in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. She had served in that program for 8 years. She operated under several covers over that period, none of which survived long enough to be dangerous. She was, by the assessment of her handlers on both sides of the joint program, one of the most effective deep-cover operatives they had fielded. Not because she was physically exceptional, because she thought like the enemy. She had grown up in post-Soviet Ukraine, which meant she understood at a cellular level how Russian-linked networks operated, what they valued, how they communicated, where they were vulnerable. She didn't learn this from briefings. She had absorbed it from the air she breathed for 22 years. She had conducted operations in Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Georgia, and Serbia. She had penetrated criminal networks, military contractor organizations, and 2 political influence operations. She had gathered intelligence that had prevented 2 significant attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and contributed to the disruption of a network that had been channeling money to armed groups in 3 countries. Her call sign was Spectre. She earned it not on a specific operation, but over the course of her entire service. She moved through operational environments the way certain natural phenomena moved, completely, without leaving evidence of passage. A specter, presence that could not be proven. People who had been in rooms with her, who had shared meals with her under assumed identities, and told her things they hadn't told anyone, sometimes later said they felt they had met a ghost. Someone who appeared and then was gone and left no mark except the knowledge she had taken with her. She left the program 3 years ago, not because of burnout, because of Sasha. Because Sasha had come to her apartment in Warsaw, where she was living under one of her covers, and had said quietly, without accusation, that she didn't know who her sister was anymore, and that she was afraid, not for herself, but for Nadia, because whoever Nadia was becoming in the years of silence and absence and half-truths, she seemed further and further from the person Sasha remembered, and Sasha did not want to lose that person entirely. Nadia looked at her twin sister across a Warsaw kitchen table and saw, in the face that was her face, something she recognized from her operational work. She saw what a person looked like when they were holding on to something with both hands and asking for help without saying the words. She filed her exit. She moved to Vienna. She built the risk consulting cover because something had to pay the rent and because her skills translated. She called Sasha every week. She visited every month. She rebuilt what 3 years had been unable to fully rebuild. The closeness of 2 people who shared a face and a childhood and who had never been meant to be separated. And now Sasha was in a vehicle in Nairobi. Nadia activated the encrypted communications unit. She sent a single query through the channel. It would reach a former colleague, a man named Voss, who had exited the same program 2 years before her, and who maintained, as she did, connections and resources from their operational period that were unofficial but real. Voss replied in 14 minutes. His message was brief and precise. Vanguard Solutions had an operational cell in Nairobi consisting of 6 personnel. The cell had been activated 3 weeks ago following an internal security review that flagged Sasha's investigation as an existential threat to the organization's primary revenue source, the mining contracts. The cell's current tasking was containment. The definition of containment in Vanguard Solutions' operational language was flexible and depended on instructions from the Zurich leadership. Voss also provided, without being asked, the cell's known operating locations in Nairobi, a safe house in the Karen district, a secondary location near Wilson Airport, a vehicle fleet registered to a Kenyan logistics company that was a Vanguard front. Nadia booked the next flight to Nairobi. She booked it under one of the passport names in the safe. She packed the go bag she had maintained for 3 years without opening, because that too was a habit that didn't dissolve. She arrived at 6:20 a.m. Nairobi time. She was not alone in Nairobi. She did not mean to be alone. She had sent 2 additional communications before her flight. One to Voss, who said he would make calls. One to a contact in the Kenyan intelligence community, a woman named Achieng who had worked with the joint program on a shared operation 4 years ago, and who had given Nadia a number and said, with the directness of someone who meant what they said, that if Nadia ever needed anything in Nairobi, she should call. Nadia called. Achieng answered. They met at a coffee shop near the International Arrivals Terminal at 7 a.m., and in 40 minutes they built a working picture of the situation. Achieng had pulled what she could from Kenyan police records and private surveillance databases. The Karen safe house was confirmed as the primary location. One of the front company's vehicles had been tracked by a private security firm's camera network from the hotel to a road in the Karen area. The police are moving slowly, Achieng said. The report was filed, but there are complications. Jurisdictional uncertainty because the subject is German press credentialed. Some concern about the identity of the people involved. Vanguard has relationships. When do they stop moving slowly? Achieng looked at her. There's a counter-terrorism unit that I can activate. They're good. But their process requires… How long? 6 hours minimum. Probably more. 6 hours was too long. Nadia knew this not as a feeling but as a calculation. Vanguard had made a decision to take Sasha. The decision was made to suppress information, which meant Sasha's continued existence was contingent on whether Vanguard leadership decided she was more useful alive as leverage or whether she was more dangerous as a continuing risk. Organizations like Vanguard made those calculations quickly, and they had made them before. 6 hours, Nadia said. Understood. Keep the counterterrorism unit ready. I want them available the moment we have a confirmed location and a viable entry package. Achieng looked at her. Then she nodded. She had worked with program operatives before. She knew what the nod meant and what it allowed, and she was making a professional judgment about how much weight to put on the regulations that governed her agency's activities, and how much weight to put on the woman sitting across from her who had arrived from Vienna in 6 hours, and had gray eyes like a winter sky, and hands that were completely still. Nadia went to Karen. She spent 90 minutes on the safe house from a distance. She rented a vehicle from a company near the airport and drove to the neighborhood, and established an observation point in a parking area from which the safe house compound was partially visible. She used the spotting device from her bag, a small unit with thermal capability, and she mapped what she could from outside the perimeter. The compound was a residential property, a low modern house behind a wall with 2 gates. She could identify 4 heat signatures through the wall, 2 near the front of the house, 1 moving between rooms, 1 stationary in a rear room not moving, which was the signature of someone who was restrained or unconscious. Sasha. The stationary signature was in a back room on the south side of the house. The 2 near the front were the guards. The 1 moving between rooms was the operator managing the situation, the cell leader. That left 2 unaccounted for. 6 in the cell, 4 visible. 2 elsewhere, which meant either off-site or in a blind spot created by the building structure. Nadia drove around the block. She identified the compound from 3 additional angles. On the west side, a vehicle was parked in the compound's secondary gate area. The vehicle was one of the front company's registered trucks. 2 men were inside it. 6, all present. She called Achieng. She gave her the confirmed location and the head count. She described the thermal pattern and what it implied about Sasha's position and condition. I'm activating the unit, Achieng said. They need 40 minutes to stage. Tell them to stage 1 block south on the approach road. Tell them the primary entry should be the main gate, north side. The secondary vehicle on the west should be neutralized before the main breach to prevent it becoming an escape route. She paused. Tell them I'll be inside when they arrive. Nadia, 40 minutes. Tell them to move at the 40 mark. She hung up. She went in from the east. The compound wall was 2 meters of plastered brick that ran continuous around the property. On the east side, a large fever tree grew against the wall from outside the compound, its branches extending over the top. Nadia climbed the tree in 45 seconds. She moved along a branch that extended over the wall and dropped into the compound's garden on the other side. She was in the compound at 11:15 a.m., 40 minutes to the counter-terrorism unit's breach. The garden was large, overgrown, a formal garden that had been allowed to return to informality over years of disinterest. She used the overgrowth for concealment, and she moved through it toward the back of the house, toward the south room where the stationary heat signature waited. The south room had a window, shuttered, a single small ventilation gap at the top of the shutters where the wood had warped. She looked through the gap. Sasha was inside. She was seated against the back wall, her wrists secured to a water pipe that ran along the base of the wall. She was awake. She was looking at the door. There was blood on her lip and a bruise forming on her left cheekbone, but she was awake, and her eyes were clear, and her posture, even restrained, had that quality Sasha had always had, that quality of observing and filing, of being a journalist, even in a room she had been put in against her will. Nadia moved to the window's exterior latch, an old mechanical lock on the shutters. She picked it in 50 seconds. She eased the shutters open by 3 centimeters, enough to pass her voice through. Sasha. She said it quietly, a breath's worth of volume, her sister's name in her voice, which was also her sister's voice. Sasha turned. She looked at the window gap. Her expression in the moment of recognition was a thing that Nadia stored in the part of herself that was not operational, the part that was Nadia before she was Spectre, the part that was a twin and a sister and a person who had chosen to come home. Nadia, Sasha said, a whisper, precise. Restraints. The pipe on the left, bolted to the floor. The clamp is old, the bolt threads are stripped. Even now, Sasha was giving a situation report. Nadia felt something that, in a different moment, she would have allowed herself to feel fully. She opened the shutters fully. She climbed through the window. She crossed to Sasha and examined the restraints. Sasha was right. The clamp was old, and the bolt threads were stripped, and with the right tool and the right angle, the clamp could be freed from the pipe without tools at all. She freed it in 70 seconds. She helped Sasha to her feet. "Can you move?" "Yes." Sasha stood. She was steady. "How many?" "6. 2 out front. 1 mobile inside, probably cell leader. 2 in the vehicle on the west side. 1 more somewhere inside." She looked at her sister. "Police counterterrorism unit is staging 1 block south. They breach in 33 minutes. Then we wait here." "We do." Nadia positioned herself between Sasha and the door. "Unless they come in before the unit does." They came at 27 minutes. The door opened. The cell leader, a man whose build and movement pattern Nadia had tracked through the thermal earlier, came into the room to check the prisoner. He saw the window open. He registered the empty wall. He started to reach for his radio. Nadia was between him and the door before his hand got to the radio. She controlled the radio hand, redirected it behind his back, and applied a joint lock that took him to the floor in 3 seconds. He was large and he was trained, and he fought it, which told her he had a background, military or paramilitary, which she had expected. She applied additional pressure to the joint until the fight left his body and replaced itself with cooperation. She zip-tied his wrists with ties from her bag. She took his radio and his weapon, a compact pistol. She looked at Sasha. Sasha was standing with her back against the wall, watching with an expression that contained no panic and a great deal of focused attention. "Still thinking this is a story?" Nadia asked. "It's the best story I've ever witnessed," Sasha said. The counterterrorism unit breached at the 40-minute mark exactly. They came through the main gate with 4 operators and a vehicle that blocked the secondary gate simultaneously, neutralizing the 2 men in the west side truck before they could move. The 2 guards at the front of the house were taken in the first 15 seconds. The operator who had been mobile inside the house was found in the kitchen and surrendered when he saw the unit's rifles. The 6th cell member was located in the garage on the north side, maintaining the cell's communications equipment. He had been attempting to reach Vanguard Solutions' Zurich Operations Center for 11 minutes. The unit detained him with the communications equipment, which included a partial log of his attempts and the numbers he had been calling, in itself, a significant intelligence product. All 6 Vanguard Solutions personnel were in Kenyan custody within 22 minutes of the breach. Achieng met Nadia outside the compound. She looked at Nadia. She looked at Sasha, who was being assessed by a unit medic. She looked back at Nadia. "You were inside for 33 minutes, Achieng said. "Yes." "The cell leader has a dislocated shoulder. He resisted a joint lock. The window latch was picked from the outside." "Yes." Achieng looked at her for a long time with the measured expression of someone who was deciding how much to say. Then she said, "Spectre." Nadia held her gaze. "I'd prefer that stayed between professionals." "It stays." Achieng looked at the compound. "The communications equipment is going to be very useful." "It should be. There will be questions. I'll answer them. All of them." Nadia glanced at Sasha, who was now standing under her own power and arguing mildly with the medic about whether she needed to sit down. "After I've been with my sister." She walked to Sasha. Sasha saw her coming and stopped arguing with the medic. They stood facing each other in the morning light of the Karen district. Same face, same gray eyes, same pale hands. The photograph from Prague in Nadia's apartment. The same women 7 years later on a compound in Nairobi. Sasha put her hand on Nadia's face, the way you do when you need to confirm that something is real. 7 minutes, Sasha said. 7 minutes, Nadia confirmed. "You came. You're my other face, Sasha. Where else would I be?" They stood there for a moment. Then Sasha said, "I have the documents, the financial trail, Vanguard Solutions, the mining companies, the Luxembourg firm. I have all of it. They didn't search my email." Nadia looked at her. "I sent everything to a secure archive the morning before the meeting," Sasha said. "It's all there. Everything I had. They took me to stop the story. The story is still there. The story is still there," Sasha confirmed. She looked at the compound, at the 6 detained men, at the counterterrorism unit processing the scene with the professional efficiency of people who had done this before. And now I have more story. You are not writing about this, Nadia said. I'm writing about this. Sasha, I will protect your name. Everything else is the public interest. Sasha looked at her with those gray eyes, the eyes they shared, the eyes that saw everything. You just conducted a rescue operation inside a mercenary safe house. That's the public interest, Nadia. I conducted a window entry and a joint lock while waiting for the police. Stop. I am a risk consultant from Vienna. Nadia. A pause. The pause of 7 minutes between them. 7 years between their closest and their furthest. And all the years between this moment and the December night in Kiev, when two women had arrived in the world with the same face and the same potential, and the different expressions of it. Write about Vanguard, Nadia said finally. Write about the mining companies. Write about the documents. Write the story that needs writing. And the rest? The rest belongs to the people who paid for it, Nadia said. And they didn't pay for it to be a story. Sasha looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded. The nod of someone who understood and who would honor what she understood, because that too was part of what she was. The story ran 11 weeks later in Frontline Press. 6,000 words. 3 main mining corporations named. Vanguard Solutions named. The Luxembourg firm's registration details published. The documentary evidence presented in detail sufficient to constitute a public record. It was cited within 48 hours by 3 parliaments, 2 international NGOs, and an investigative body of the European Union that had been waiting for exactly this kind of evidence to open proceedings. Vanguard Solutions suspended operations pending investigation within a month. Its Zurich offices were raided by Swiss authorities. Its operating licenses in 2 jurisdictions were revoked. The 3 mining corporations named in the story saw their share prices decline significantly, and 2 of their CEOs resigned. 2 were subsequently under investigation by the relevant national regulatory authorities. The 6 men in Kenyan custody were tried and convicted on kidnapping charges and charges relating to their operational conduct. In Kenya, the cell leader received the longest sentence. He appealed. The appeal court considered his criminal record, which included 1 previous conviction related to his activities while employed by a security contractor in Libya, and dismissed the appeal. Nadia was back in Vienna when the verdict came through. She read it at her desk. She looked at the coffee maker. She looked at the books on the shelf. She looked at the photograph on the wall. Prague. Same face, same eyes. Sasha's arm around her shoulder, both of them laughing at something already forgotten. She picked up her phone and called Sasha. Vienna, Sasha said when she answered. Berlin, Nadia said. Did you see the verdict? I saw it. He got 12 years. I know. You should feel something about that. I feel several things about that, Nadia said. Most of them involve relief that you're in Berlin writing about the verdict and not in Karen. Sasha was quiet for a moment. Then, Nadia. Thank you. 7 minutes, Nadia said. I was 7 minutes ahead. I owe you at least that much. Sasha laughed. The laugh that was also Nadia's laugh. The one they shared the way they shared everything that mattered. Completely and without reservation. They talked for an hour. They talked about the story and the verdict, and their mother in Kiev, who had been told nothing except that Sasha had been briefly detained during a reporting trip and was fine. They talked about Christmas plans, and whether Nadia would come to Berlin or Sasha would come to Vienna, and they decided Berlin because Sasha had found a restaurant with Ukrainian food that she wanted Nadia to try. When they hung up, Nadia sat in her spare, clean apartment in the early autumn dark. The floor safe was closed, the go bag was restocked and under the bed. The encrypted communications unit was in its place. Everything where it belonged, everything ready. Spectre was retired. Nadia Volkov was home. The distinction was real, and it was maintained with intention and care, and the daily deliberate choice to be the person she had returned from 7 years of darkness to be. But the safe was under the bed, and the go bag was packed, because Sasha was in Berlin, and the world that contained Sasha required defending, and Nadia Volkov had made a calculation about what she was willing to pay for that defense that had no upper limit and no expiration date. Spectre, still here, still counting minutes. If you believe that true heroes carry scars and not capes, share this story.